So I've seen some LSU fans that feel like the over-under win total for LSU in 2024 is disrespectful. Disrespectful to Brian Kelly and this team. My question to you is why? Because not only do I think that the over-under win total isn't disrespectful, in fact, I actually think it's pretty generous.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Also, remember, we're also on YouTube as well. So search Locked On LSU in the search bar. Hit that subscribe button, and you will get notified as soon as new episodes of Locked On LSU drop. Today's edition of Locked On LSU is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off of your purchase. All right, let's get into it. I don't know if these over/under win totals that have been put out for the college football season in 2024 on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. I don't know if that was new. I don't know if those have been out for a while and it's just news to me and I haven't even checked. But the reason why I'm talking about it today is because I've seen a lot of chatter in LSU spaces, on LSU Twitter, from some friends that are LSU fans and alumni. I've heard a lot of chatter about it. So if it's new or not, excuse me if it's not new. It's more so reaction to see the sentiment toward LSU's over/under win total. On the FanDuel Sportsbook app, it's set at 9.5. And so much of the talk, if not all of the talk that I have heard, and this isn't calling out one individual person or one individual take, this is honestly a combination of a lot of different things that I've heard. What I've heard is it's disrespectful, that LSU deserves better. That 9.5 wins, are you kidding me? That's not fair. The disrespect to LSU. And look, you are totally entitled to your own opinion. If you feel like that's disrespectful, then that's totally that you feel the way that you want to feel. All I can do is tell you how I feel about it. But my question to you would be, what did you expect? Did you expect higher? Did you expect it to be 10.5? For a few, and I think it's actually quite generous, to be honest with you. And you can call me a Debbie Downer all you want. I like to think that I look at things through a pretty objective lens as much as you can as an LSU fan. But here's the reason why I think it's actually pretty generous. First and foremost, you've won 9 games in the regular season the past 2 seasons. We like to say back-to-back 10-win seasons because it is, but it was back-to-back 10-win seasons, including wins in bowl games. You have won 9 regular season games in each of Brian Kelly's seasons as the head coach at LSU. The last 2 years, you've won 9 games in the regular season. So you're kind of getting a half of a game of a benefit of the doubt from FanDuel here. Why would FanDuel, or whatever, our friends at FanDuel, who we love very much, why would any other sports book give LSU any more benefit of the doubt than that? The other thing is, it's not like LSU has some sort of, frou-frou cupcake schedule that they can just walk through this season unscathed and easily. No, that's not the case. And we'll get into the schedule coming up next. But LSU has a really hard schedule. I don't see very many gimmies on there. I don't see a schedule that's not going to be challenged that much this year. This is the freaking SEC, okay? This is the SEC, and you play 2 out-of-conference Power 5 games. That's a tough schedule. And also, I think you have to keep in mind everything that you're losing. You lost your quarterback, who won the Heisman Trophy this past season, who also, oh yeah, by the way, was your leading rusher on the season. You're also losing your second leading rusher in Logan Diggs, who's headed to, now you don't just lose him, now you have to play him because he transferred to Ole Miss. You lost your 2 leading receivers in every statistical category. Your 2 leading receivers in terms of receptions, your 2 leading receivers in terms of yards, and your 2 leading receivers in terms of touchdowns in Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas. And oh, yeah, by the way, those are the 2 season leaders in the country in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns in Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas. You're losing both of your starting defensive tackles in Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo, who I think had and not been for injury, they'd probably both be first round picks. Of course, both of them had kind of an underwhelming season this past year, so they're not going to be first round picks. But I think they're both first round talent. You're losing both of those. And it's not even just who you're losing on the roster. Like you lost your offensive coordinator that coordinated the number 1 offense in the country this past season. That's a lot. And while I feel encouraged, and I think you feel encouraged about what LSU can do this upcoming season, in spite of what they've lost, well, I feel encouraged about the defense being significantly better. One, because I don't know how much they can get much worse. 2, because your coaching staff is better. I feel incredibly encouraged about that. I feel incredibly excited about what Garrett Nussmeier can do this upcoming season. I'm intrigued to see who steps up in this receiving core. But I mean, that's my glass half full LSU fan impression of it all. You're losing a lot. You have to replace a lot. There's a lot of change on this LSU team this upcoming season. And FanDuel is still giving you 9.5 wins. Frankly, when you look at it that way, I think it's pretty generous. I don't think it's any sort of disrespect to LSU. I really don't think that in the slightest. Because to put it into context, I think you also have to look at the rest of the SEC, right? Alabama set at 9.5 wins. Arkansas, 5.5, woof. Auburn, 7.5, also I would say awfully generous. Florida, 5.5, incredibly generous. Georgia, 10.5. Kentucky, 6.5. I think those are both pretty fair. Of course, LSU at 9.5, Mississippi State 4.5, woof. Mizzou 9.5, Oklahoma 7.5, Ole Miss 9.5 as well. South Carolina 5.5, Tennessee 8.5, Texas A&M, excuse me, Texas 10.5, A&M 8.5, Vanderbilt 2.5. Without even thinking of the over/under win totals, if I asked you, hey, give me your ranking, like your tiers for SEC football going into the 2024 season as currently constructed. What I would say is Georgia 1, Texas 2. And then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think that you could make a case for, but I think that it's Georgia 1, Texas 2, and then there's this tier of teams that I think can be really good. And it's just a matter of a few games, winning and losing a few games here and there. And I think in that tier, it's Ole Miss. I think it's LSU. I think it's Alabama. Alabama's obviously losing a lot, but I still think they're going to be a good team. I think you can throw Missouri in there. And I think that next tier, like if that's tier 2A, then maybe 2B is like Texas A&M and Tennessee. That feels right? Like without even looking at the schedules, without even looking at the win totals, like that just feels like the right thing. Well, I mean, LSU falls into that category. One of 4 SEC teams that I would put in tier 2A that are all at 9.5 wins. I think that's totally fair. And frankly, I have no problem with it. You can pick a problem and pick an issue with whatever you want to make a problem with or have a bone to pick with. But frankly, I think 9.5 wins, it's pretty fair. Because this league is only getting more difficult and you're losing a lot. But I don't think it's fair to say just, 9.5 wins. I don't think that's fair. I think we need to go through the schedule because I could be totally off. I could be totally and completely off. So let's go through the schedule game by game. Games LSU should win, games LSU might lose, and games that could be toss-ups. Games that could be the deciding factors between 9 wins, 10 wins, not less than 9, more than 10. We'll get into that coming up next after just a few words from our sponsors. All right, I am so excited to tell y'all about Game Time. So it's a super fast and easy way to buy tickets for all of the sporting events, the games, concerts, comedy shows, plays, and musicals, anything that you want to go to that you need a ticket for. You can get you can buy tickets on Game Time for any of those events near you. Right now, all users get $100 off when they buy a big game ticket with code Vegas100 VEGAS100. There's killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. I love Game Time. You have my word, I promise you. That's the first place that I go to look for tickets. There's a comedy show that I want to go to. I'm dying to go to near me. So I went to Game Time because I knew that I was going to get the best price at Game Time. One thing that frustrates me is I'll go on another third party ticket site and I'll say, okay, yeah, it's a good price for these tickets. I'll add them to cart. I'll check out. And then the taxes and the fees are just as much, if not more, the actual price of the ticket itself. That is not the price with Game Time, and you have the Game Time guarantee. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Terms apply. Just download the Game Time app and use code locked on LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. Again, that's the Game Time app. Use code locked on LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, rolling along here, Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we are part of the Locked On Network, your team every single day. So, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports today right now, and it's available for free on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, rolling along here, Locked On LSU. So FanDuel, and again, honestly, I'll be completely transparent with you. I don't know if these are new or not. It's just the first time that I saw it. So FanDuel has the over/under win totals for college football this upcoming season, and they separate it by conference: Big Ten, ACC, Big 12 win totals. The SEC win totals have LSU winning 9.5 games, over/under 9.5. Now that's the third best, tied for the third best win total in the conference. Georgia, the best at 10.5. Texas, also 10.5 as well, which I find very interesting. And look, I'm not sold on Texas being some sort of gauntlet every single year because let's not forget, Steve Sarkisian has yet to win a bowl game at Texas. Like, let's not forget that. But they're coming off of a college football playoff year. And yeah, they're going to have to replace Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, their two leading receivers. They're going to have to replace their leading rusher, but they return Quinn Ewers. And they just signed Sark to a massive, massive extension. They picked up a decent bit, a solid haul in the transfer portal. So you're replacing Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell with Isaiah Bond. Hello, 4th and 31. Isaiah Bond, the Alabama transfer. So they picked up some really solid pieces in the transfer portal. I have no problem with the Texas over/under win total at 10.5. I don't have a problem with Georgia over/under 10.5 because those two play each other. So someone's going to have to lose that game. But LSU is set at 9.5. I know there are some LSU fans out there that have a problem with that. And you listening, you might not have a problem with that. But I actually, frankly, think it's quite generous since there are so many question marks about this LSU team. Yes, of course, you have continuity on the offensive line. All you have to do is replace the center position. Yes, of course, you have continuity with your head coach. But you're replacing your offensive coordinator who coordinated the top offense in the country last year. You're replacing a Heisman Trophy winning, quarterback in Jayden Daniels. And I'm excited about Garrett Nussmeier, but still, that's quite a question mark. Your defense is a question mark, personnel wise and coaching wise. But I only think it's fair to, agree with, not agree with, whatever it might be with the win total if we go through the schedule game by game by game. Because it can be easy to say, Tennessee 8-win team. Oh, Georgia 11-win team. But let's go through the schedule. Let's break it down. Let's start from the top. USC Labor Day weekend in Vegas. We're already starting off with a toughie. Because I think that LSU and USC find themselves in kind of similar positions, right? Both the defenses sucked last year. Both replaced their defensive coordinators. Now, if I had to give an advantage to who replaced their defensive coaching staffs better, I don't know how you can do better than what LSU did. Both are replacing Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks. Of course, USC is now trying to figure out life after Caleb Williams. LSU is figuring out life after Jayden Daniels. But again, if I have to give an advantage to who is probably best equipped right now for life post Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, I think it's LSU. I mean, I think USC is going into the spring with a quarterback battle. That USC had a quarterback transfer out this past season who would have been in competition for that starting quarterback position. LSU, it's Garrett Nussmeier, and he looks pretty prepped and ready to take over this job, at least what we saw from Wisconsin. So I would say advantage LSU quarterback, advantage LSU in just defensive upgrades, just because both these defenses were horrible. So I guess all there really is to go is up. But I still think this game totally could be a toss up. I lean LSU, which you're probably listening and thinking, yeah, of course you do. Obviously, you're an LSU fan. I do lean LSU, but also we know how LSU has looked in the first game of the season against Power 5 non-conference opponents. So I'm going to be scarred a little bit there. But with two teams that are still trying to figure out who they're going to be this upcoming season, I'll take the team with the more senior quarterback and the more experienced quarterback. So I lean LSU. So I will say LSU beats USC, but again, kind of a toss up there. Nichols, that's a win. South Carolina, they're living life post Spencer Rattler, life post Juice Wells, life post Xavier Legette. I'm not very high on Shane Beamer. I know it's at Willie B. I'm going to say win for LSU. UCLA, also another team in a lot of transition. In case you didn't see, Chip Kelly just left UCLA. I go win. South Alabama, that's a win. So you're going into, by my evaluation, you're going into the Ole Miss game 5-0. You host Ole Miss in Tiger Stadium. I think that this game is going to play out very similarly than it did last year. Maybe not, giving up 700 yards. Maybe not a 100 to 101 kind of game like it was last season. Please, I hope it doesn't turn out that way. I have LSU down as losing to Ole Miss. Now, don't come for me, okay? Ole Miss returns Jackson Dart and their quarterback. Ole Miss picked up an absolute haul in the transfer portal. Now, I will apply that same logic with Ole Miss that I do at LSU, and you're going to have to show me before I believe in you when you bring in transfer portal additions, because you still have to accommodate for fit. You have to accommodate for, just the team culture as a whole. I do think that when you go too heavy in the transfer portal, you risk some culture questions, some locker room questions. So I'm not totally sold on Ole Miss, but I do think Ole Miss is going to be pretty freaking good. I'm not, I'm not chugging the Kool-Aid on Ole Miss, but I'm going to buy it a little bit. So I'll say LSU loses to Ole Miss this year. Arkansas win. Yikes. A&M is another very interesting one. A&M is another one. So you would go into the A&M game 6-1 with that one loss being Ole Miss. It's in College Station. The past 8 years, the home team has won that game. I don't think that's a coincidence. When you played A&M last year, they were without their starting quarterback and they were without their backup quarterback, Connor Wigman and Max Johnson. Connor Wigman is coming back from injury this upcoming season. And I think Connor Wigman is a pretty darn good quarterback that we all have just kind of forgotten about because he got injured in the middle of the season against Auburn last year. But I think A&M could be a pretty solid team. Now, is pretty solid team good enough to beat you? I don't know the answer to that question because I don't know what year one with Mike Elko looks like, frankly. I'm gonna say that's kind of a toss-up game. I lean a win for LSU, but also, like, honestly, I don't know. I don't know. That's kind of a toss-up one for me. Alabama is another toss-up game for me because I think it's really easy for us to say, okay, well, no Nick Saban, you lost a lot of players in the transfer portal, that Alabama is going to have a down season. And I would agree with you that Alabama is going to have a down season by Alabama standards. But I still think that a quote unquote down season for Alabama could be 9 wins. Again, it's just hard to put my finger on this team because you don't have Nick Saban, okay? So you don't have the Nick Saban BOD, the Nick Saban benefit of the doubt anymore. But you do return your quarterback. And I don't think that Jalen Milroe is Bryce Young, but I think Jalen Milroe is pretty good. No, you do get Alabama at home. So I would say advantage LSU there. I think that Alabama is definitely gettable this year. Toss-up game for me. Now, I have two toss-ups here, A&M and Alabama. So since they're both toss-ups, I'm going to say loss there. I'll say win A&M, loss Alabama, but you can, kind of shift it around wherever you want. This is just for win totals purposes. Then you round out the season with Florida, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma. I think all of those three games are going to be wins. So you're looking there at a 10-2 season, potentially, with a toss-up to USC. So, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Like, maybe it's not the 9.5 win total isn't favorable, but also maybe I'm looking at this schedule through purple and gold tinted glasses. And let's remember, it's February. A lot of things change from now until October. Heck, a lot of things change from August to September and September to October and week 8 to week 9 and week 2 to week 3. Things change incredibly rapidly in this sport. This is a fickle little sport. All right, coming up next, it is a Mailbag Wednesdays. We'll get into your questions. I appreciate everyone who sent in questions. Send them in on Twitter, send them on YouTube, but we'll get into your questions on a Mailbag Wednesday coming up next after just a few words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you about FanDuel. We've done a whole lot of talking about FanDuel on today's podcast with LSU's over and under win totals for the 2024 season, and it's because I frankly just love FanDuel so much. And you can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, that's $150 if your bet wins, and you can bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, so much more. And hey, if the NBA is not your jam, don't worry about it because we got plenty of college football over under win totals to bet on FanDuel as well. Just visit fanduel.com/locked on and shoot your shot. Again, that is fanduel.com/locked on. And new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, rolling along here, locked on LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. It is a Mailbag Wednesday. Appreciate everyone for sending those questions in. Questions, comments, concerns, just general ideas. We take it all here on the Locked on LSU podcast. If you want to get in on the conversation for next week's Mailbag Wednesday, feel free to comment questions, comments, concerns below on the YouTube page, or you can send them in on Twitter. My personal account is at Caroline Fenton1. You can see it there below if you're watching on the YouTube page, or you can check it out on the podcast Twitter page at Locked on LSU. So let's get into it because one, and not necessarily a comment, but just not necessarily a question rather, but more so a comment. One person says, I really hope that LSU fans are giving Matt McMahon some time. I agree wholeheartedly. I do. Because I said last season, give Matt McMahon 2 years. I've been reiterating this season, give Matt McMahon 2 years. Reserve total and complete judgment for 2 years. For a couple of reasons. One, hello, did you see what he inherited? Every single scholarship player on this roster transferred. He had to completely rebuild this team. You don't do that in a day. You don't do that in a season. And it's not just about getting the players, about getting the bodies. It's also about establishing your expectations, establishing your quote unquote culture, which sometimes I rolls my eyes when people talk about culture, but it is an important thing that you set the expectation, you set the foundation. Brian Kelly talks about it all the time. That hey, now that I'm here for 2 years, we feel like we've established a really good thing, and now we're set to ascend. Of course, Brian Kelly has found more success in his first 2 years than Matt McMahon has. I understand that, and I acknowledge that wholeheartedly. But I think that what you can take away, because it's not like we're just going to ignore the process. It's not like we're just going to ignore these past 2 seasons and Matt McMahon's first 2 seasons. But what I wanted to see was progress. Last year was rough. And I said, while I'm not going to fire Matt McMahon after 2 years, especially considering how much of a train wreck he took over, I just need to see progress. I need to see this team get better. I need to see this team buy in. I need to see some fight in this team. Whatever that shows up in the win and loss column, if I can feel like this team is fighting week in and week out and you're making progress, I can live with that. And I can feel encouraged and optimistic about what Matt McMahon can do with time. I don't know how you could watch this LSU basketball team and say they don't have fight. That they don't play with 110% effort every single night. Look at how many games this team has lost in the final second. Now, they did win a game in the final second at South Carolina this past weekend, and thank goodness. I mean, that's huge. That is huge. Florida. Jordan Wright just doesn't take a three. Jordan Wright passes the ball off, time expires, you lose to Florida by 2. Earlier in the season, you miss a shot, you lose to Georgia. Was it by 1, by 2? Against Alabama, when you gave up over 100 points to Alabama, even late in the game, you kept that game close. You just let Alabama go on a double-digit streak, and you just didn't have an answer for the 3. But I haven't watched a single game this season that I've said, man, they just didn't have any heart out there tonight. You need more talent, of course. You need to find more scoring. You need to be more consistent. But everything that I've seen, I've liked. And if you're watching this podcast, and I'm recording it on a Wednesday afternoon, if you're watching this podcast, it's before LSU Kentucky tip. Now, we could be watching it and listening to it after and thinking, this girl's a total doofus for what I'm about to say, but I think LSU's going to beat Kentucky tonight. Look, you get them at home. Kentucky went on the road in the jungle at Auburn, a place where Auburn hasn't lost all season long, and they beat Auburn by double digits. This is a young Kentucky team. I think that there's a very high likelihood that Kentucky could be doing one of two things, if not both. Still, riding the high of that win at Auburn. 2, overlooking LSU, or both. And I think that LSU could be riding this high. It very well could still be, have the goggles on from the South Carolina win. But I believe in Matt McMahon as a good enough coach that they're going to enjoy that win and move on from it and look ahead to Kentucky. Because I know LSU ain't looking past Kentucky. So I think LSU might beat Kentucky tonight. I don't think it's crazy to think. I think there's just optimism. Optimism is what I feel for this LSU basketball team. Now, LSU, very well, if you're listening to this on Thursday morning, LSU could have gotten blown out, and you think I'm a total and complete doofus. That very much so is in the cards as well. So, yeah, I mean, don't shoot the messenger here. It's just the feeling that I get from this team, and I think that it's upward trajectory, and I'm excited about it. I rambled and I didn't have enough time to answer more of your questions, so we'll get to more of your questions on next week's podcast. Again, you can send them in, questions, comments, concerns, on the YouTube page. Just comment below or send them in on Twitter. And coming up on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU, we'll chat with Brian Smith, Locked On's official recruiting insider, some names of potential quarterback in the 2026 class that is high on LSU, and also who he loved from Under Armour this past weekend in Atlanta. We will get into that with Brian Smith on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.